Number 2 on my countdown is probably number 1 on everybody else's list. And that, of course, is WrestleMania 17. Now, this pay-per-view would definitely be number 1 on my top 10 list if I didn't have extremely sentimental reasons for picking the WrestleMania that I did. And I'm sure you guys all know what number 1 is going to be. And I'm sorry to do this to WrestleMania 17. This was a fantastic WrestleMania. And every time I see top 10 or top 5 WrestleMania videos, whether it be on YouTube or on the internet or wherever, WrestleMania 17 is number 1 on just about everybody's list. And I don't even know where to start with this fucking pay-per-view. There was so much good shit. Throughout the duration of this countdown, I've generally been starting with the main event. I think we should do that here. Houston, we have a problem. Stone Cold Steve Austin taking on The Rock, a rematch from 2 years prior at WrestleMania 15, a show that I was at in Philadelphia to see Steve Austin beat The Rock. This match I thought was so much better. First of all, it was a babyface match. Austin had just come back from neck surgery the previous, September, and had the feud with Rikishi and Triple H. And now, after winning the Royal Rumble, he's going on to face The Rock, who defeated Kurt Angle at No Way Out for the title. And here you have 2 megastars. This was about as close as you could get to a Hogan and Andre or to a Hogan and Warrior back in the day. I mean, these 2 guys were mega stars, huge stars, about as big as you could ever be. And there was 2 of them. This WrestleMania was in Houston, Stone Cold Steve Austin's home state, and he's a super over babyface. And of course, the finish here is a controversial one. They turned Steve Austin heel. In hindsight, might have not been the greatest idea for them to do. And it might even be a reason why WWE has always been too chicken shit to do something like this again with guys like John Cena or Roman Reigns. But still, the match was great. I mean, it was hard hitting. It was bloody. You know, these 2 guys as baby faces were pulling out all the stops. The promotion and the build to this was one of the best of all time. I mentioned The Rock and John Cena earlier on, how much work WWE put into promoting that match. But, you know, the Limp Bizkit tie-in here and the My Way song and everything they were doing, building up this main event, is extremely memorable. Every fan remembers back to this time. I hate Limp Bizkit. I think they're a shitty band. I think Fred Durst sucks. But for some reason, that shitty fucking song worked so perfectly in this main event. Whenever I go back and watch this, I'm bobbing my head to this crappy-ass song that they used. But it fit, and it worked, and it got everybody really amped up for this match. And I thought not only was the promotion and the build to this match awesome, but the match itself was awesome. And you had the swerve ending where Vince McMahon comes down to the ring and helps Steve Austin beat The Rock for the WWE title. The finish saw Austin just hammering The Rock into the mat like a fucking railroad spike with that steel chair. Chair shot after chair shot after chair shot. Vince McMahon had made the match a no disqualification match at the last minute. And Austin was finally able to keep The Rock down for a 3 count, win the WWE title, shake hands with Mr. McMahon, and toast a beer with him. And I think the call of the night came from Jim Ross when he says, "Son of a bitch, I don't believe this." You know, I will never forget Jim Ross saying that in our ear, because Jim Ross was a friend of Stone Cold Steve Austin, and the character of Jim Ross felt personally betrayed that Austin would do this. It was like watching your best friend turn on you or do something that you can't believe, or kill someone or rob a bank. You can't even believe that they're capable of doing that. And you could hear that. You could feel that in Jim Ross's voice. He wasn't with Jerry Lawler during this WrestleMania because Lawler had left right before the buyout when the cat was let go. So JR had the call with Paul Heyman. And I think the 2 of them did a really good job. I remember a lot of this WrestleMania because of the announcing of Jim Ross and Paul Heyman. I thought the 2 did a great job together, and I might have even preferred them over JR and Lawler. I thought that Heyman was just a really good fit for this particular WrestleMania because this was at the height of the Attitude Era. You know, you needed an edgier, more hardcore type of commentator, and Paul Heyman was definitely that. ECW had really not even technically closed its doors by this point, and I thought Paul Heyman did a great job on commentary for this pay-per-view. Now, Austin and Rock was your big marquee main event, but this match, or this pay-per-view, I should say, was loaded with huge matches. The Undertaker and Triple H wrestled in their first of 3 WrestleMania matches together in a singles match. And I've told this story before. Back in the day when I would do my predictions during my hotline days, I actually predicted Triple H to defeat The Undertaker. I thought this was going to be the WrestleMania where Undertaker finally received his first loss. And I've never been happier to be wrong. This match turned out to be a lot better than I expected it to be. It was brutal. They were all over the arena. They were fighting into the crowd. The entrances were amazing. You know, Triple H was being played to the ring by Motorhead. Undertaker rode his motorcycle down that long entranceway, which was just a great visual. The two guys went out there and put on a really good match with a lot of twists and turns and near falls and nail-biting moments. Especially when I think Triple H or Undertaker, I think, went for the last ride, and Triple H had the sledgehammer in his hand and he bashed the Undertaker in the head. I thought that was going to be it for the Undertaker, you know, and the great ending finally when he is able to hit the last ride on Triple H and pin him, and then you have that great visual of the Undertaker kind of leaning in between the top and middle rope with the blood coming down his head and that smile on his face. It was great shit. One of my favorite WrestleMania matches ever. I think their other two would outdo these. I think 27 and 28 were amazing 10 years later. But this Undertaker and Triple H match was damn good. We also had Shane McMahon defeating Vince McMahon on this show. This match was crazy. So much stuff going on. It was a street fight. You had Mick Foley as the special guest referee. You had Linda out there in a fucking wheelchair. The WWE had just purchased WCW a week prior. 6 days before WrestleMania on Monday Night Raw was the big simulcast on TNN and TNT, where Shane bought the company out from underneath his dad. And to me, still, looking back, is such a surreal time. You know, think about that. WWE is on the heels of their biggest WrestleMania ever. Their biggest one to date, arguably, with one of their biggest main events that they've ever had. Like I said, maybe aside from Hogan and Andre and Hogan and Warrior. I mean, this was a huge, epic match. And it's your go-home show. Your final week of TV to really build and sell your pay-per-views. And then on top of all of that that's already going on for WrestleMania, you're going to buy your competition. You're going to put an end to the Monday Night Wars. It's amazing that this all took place the week of WrestleMania 17 instead of any other time of the year, like in June or July or January or any other time when WrestleMania is not the focal point. It's kind of crazy that all this happened at once. And I really wonder how WWE would have handled the WCW purchase and the invasion had the buyout taken place at some other time of the year. Maybe like 3 or 4 months after this. Maybe after SummerSlam or something like that. I really think we might have seen a whole different kind of invasion had the buyout taken place at a different time of year. They could have even built towards WrestleMania for something. You know, if they would have bought WCW out in August of 2001 instead of March, then they could have set up some invasion stuff and some WCW matches to headline WrestleMania 18. But it's still pretty amazing to realize that all of that took place within this 1 week. So Shane McMahon and Vince McMahon had been building up their issue, and then you add the WCW stuff on top of this. It was sensory overload for me. And of course, you know, as would be the case with a lot of Vince McMahon matches, we talked about this earlier at WrestleMania 19, he had a damn entertaining match at WrestleMania with his son. These two guys got nuts, real nuts. The great shot of Shane McMahon performing that coast-to-coast Van Terminator on his dad with the trash can in front of him and bashing Vince right in the face. You had Linda McMahon out there rising up from her wheelchair, coming out of her coma to nutshot Vince McMahon. I mean, this match was so crazy. You can't make this shit up. You know, Vince being out there and Trish being out there. Trish and Stephanie got into a catfight during this thing. I mean, it was such a perfect example of how fun the Attitude Era could be back then, because this match had everything. It was almost too much. It was almost too confusing. There were almost too many components here, but it all came together and made for a really entertaining match. And it's a shame that Shane McMahon, after he was victorious here, never did really get to relaunch WCW and make that a thing. The invasion turned out to be such a joke, but we didn't know that back at WrestleMania 17. The sky was the limit for WWE and what they might do with WCW. So Shane getting the win here just added to our speculation as to what the future is going going to hold over the next 6 months. Really wish it would have turned out to be better than it was. Probably the other biggest match on this show was definitely the TLC match for the tag team titles. Edge and Christian defeating the Dudley Boys and the Hardy Boys. I believe the Dudley Boys actually were champions going into this thing. And this match was even crazier than their other ladder matches. Now, Edge and Christian and the Hardy Boys had got the ball rolling on this ladder match nonsense back at No Mercy 1999. They would have a big match with the three teams at WrestleMania 16, and then they would have another one at SummerSlam 2000, which I was there to see live. And I was really up close for that match, and it was nuts. Now you're doing it again. Tables, ladders, and chairs match. I believe this was TLC 2. So I think in No Mercy 99, it was just a ladder match. I think it was also just a ladder match for WrestleMania 16, if I'm not mistaken. And then SummerSlam 2000 was the TLC, and this was TLC 2. And they outdid themselves. Two big spots in this match. I think we all remember them better than anything else, one of which was the insane table bump that I believe Bubba and Matt Hardy took, where they were up on the ladder in the middle of the ring. And this was when they had those big giant ladders. They had gotten away from the tiny ones. Now you got these monstrosity ladders in the ring, and poor Matt and Bubba are up there on the top of that thing. They get pushed over and they crash through an entire fort of tables that are set up on the outside of the ring. The tables explode. Just an amazing visual to watch those guys go flying through there. Lita was getting physical in this match because she was in the corner of the Hardys. You had Spike Dudley running out there to try to help out the Dudley Boys. And Edge and Christian, all the while, are kind of sneaking under the radar here. And who can forget the amazing shot of Edge spearing Jeff Hardy off of the apparatus that suspends the belts above the ring. And to watch them fall from that height, it felt like they were in the air for 5 minutes before they finally crashed down to the mat. And it was one of the best just overall visuals in WrestleMania history. I absolutely loved that moment. And I loved that Edge and Christian won this match. And I remember back then the internet fans, or what the internet fans would become, they were so mad. Everybody was so pissed at Edge and Christian for always winning these matches while taking the least amount of punishment. It always felt like the Hardy Boys and the Dudley Boys were the ones that were out there taking the big risks and killing themselves. And Edge and Christian just kind of got to coast in underneath and steal the belts every single time. I believe they won the WrestleMania 16 match, the SummerSlam match, and this one. Is that right? So Edge and Christian completely owned these ladder matches, and I remember it used to piss off the fans so bad. But I loved it. I didn't care. I just thought the matches were good. They were fun. They were exciting, and they were doing things at that time that we had never seen. Now, in 2019, we've seen everything. You go back and look at these matches, they will still be good, but you might not say, oh, wow, that's the craziest thing I've ever seen. We've seen a lot crazier since then. But up until this point, nobody was exploding 7 tables at a time by falling off a 30-foot tall ladder and shit like that. It was nuts. So those are really the 4 big matches that this pay-per-view, I believe, is the most known for, but it was still loaded with a lot of other great stuff. Kurt Angle and Chris Benoit had a singles match on this show. It doesn't get much better than that when it comes to in-ring wrestlers. We had a really fun hardcore title match as well. I believe it was a triple threat with Kane, Raven, and the Big Show. And they were all backstage, and Raven was being thrown through a glass window, and there was golf carts involved. It was a mess. Eddie Guerrero won the European title on this show. Chris Jericho had a great Intercontinental title match with William Regal, which Jericho retained. And who can forget the Gimmick Battle Royal? That was so much fun. Iron Sheik won that. And because this was right after the WCW buyout, WWE brought in Mean Gene Okerlund and Bobby Heenan. I cannot tell you how much this warmed my heart. And really, Bobby Heenan, this was the last time we really saw him because he started to get sick right after this. And to see Bobby and Gene back on WWE TV, I can't even express to you how important and crazy that was for a fan like me. I couldn't believe those guys left 8 years prior. I think they both left in 1993, and I never thought they'd be back. And to see them back in WWE was just real special for a fan like me, put it that way. And it's a shame that Bobby Heenan's health would decline so rapidly after this. But The Battle Royal, even though there was like 20 men in it, I think it lasted 3 minutes, maybe 4 minutes. The Iron Sheik won. You had all sorts of characters in there. You had Tugboat, you had Hillbilly Jim, you had Brother Love, you had the Goon. I think Gobbledygooker was in there somewhere. Maybe Repo Man. All sorts of just funky-ass gimmicks from the past. Just a fun match. Just to see all those old-timers in there and some of the hokiest and weirdest gimmicks in WWE all competing in the same match at the same time was fun, and I thought it offered some comic relief, and it gave us a little break. Like I said, it didn't last long. I think the entrances lasted longer than the match, but still, it was a big deal at the time, and I remember when I was listening to hotlines and reading wrestling news, every week WWE would announce a couple of more names for this Battle Royal, and it turned out to be one of the things I was interested in the most at this pay-per-view. Like I said, even though it only went about 3 minutes. But WrestleMania 17, what can you say about it? Probably the best WrestleMania of all time.